Buongiorno and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Pinocchio by C. Collodi. Chapter 34. Pinocchio is swallowed by the dogfish. After Pinocchio had been 50 minutes under the water, his purchaser said aloud to himself, "My poor little lame donkey must by this time be quite drowned. I will therefore pull him out of the water, and I will make a fine drum over his skin." And he began to haul in the rope that he had tied to the donkey's leg, and he hauled and hauled and hauled until at last, what do you think appeared above the water? Instead of a little dead donkey, he saw a live puppet who was wriggling like an eel. Seeing this wooden puppet, the poor man thought he was dreaming, and struck dumb with astonishment, he remained with his mouth open and his eyes starting out of his head. Having somewhat recovered from his first stupefaction, he asked in a quavering voice, "And the little donkey that I threw into the sea, what has become of him?" "I am the little donkey," said Pinocchio, laughing. "You? I? Ah, you young scamp! Do you dare to make game of me?" "To make game of you? Quite the contrary, my dear master. I am speaking seriously." "But how can you? Who but a short time ago were a little donkey have become a wooden puppet only from having been left in the water?" "It must have been the effect of sea water. The sea makes extraordinary changes." "Beware, puppet, beware. Don't imagine that you can amuse yourself at my expense. Woe to you if I lose patience." "Well, master, do you wish to know the true story? If you will set my leg free, I will tell it to you." The good man, who was curious to hear the true story, immediately untied the knot that kept him bound, and Pinocchio, finding himself free as a bird in the air, commenced as follows. "You must know that I was once a puppet, as I am now, and I was on the point of becoming a boy like the many who are in the world. But instead, induced by my dislike for study and the advice of bad companions, I ran away from home. One fine day, when I awoke, I found myself changed into a donkey with long ears and a long tail. What a disgrace it was to me! A disgrace, dear master, that even your worst enemy would not inflict upon you. Taken to the market to be sold, I was bought by the director of an equestrian company, who took it into his head to make a famous dancer of me, and a famous leaper through hoops. But one night during a performance, I had a bad fall in the circus and lamed both my legs. Then the director, not knowing what to do with a lame donkey, sent me to be sold, and you were the purchaser." "Only too true, and I paid $2 for you. And now, Who will give me back my good money? And why did you buy me? You bought me to make a drum of my skin. Only too true. And now, where shall I find another skin? Don't despair, master. There are such a number of little donkeys in the world. Tell me, you impertinent rascal, does your story end here? No, answered the puppet. I have another 2 words to say, and then I shall have finished. After you had bought me, you brought me to this place to kill me. But then, yielding to a feeling of compassion, you preferred to tie a stone round my neck and to throw me into the sea. This humane feeling does you great honor, and I shall always be grateful to you for it. But nevertheless, dear master, this time you made your calculations without considering the fairy. And who is the fairy? She is my mamma, and she resembles all other good mammas who care for their children and who never lose sight of them, but help them lovingly, even when, on account of their foolishness and evil conduct, they deserve to be abandoned and left to themselves. Well, then the good fairy, as soon as she saw that I was in danger of drowning, sent immediately an immense shoal of fish, who, believing me really to be a little dead donkey, began to eat me, and what mouthfuls they took! I should never have thought that fish were greedier than boys. Some ate my ears, some my muzzle, others my neck and mane, some the skin of my legs, some my coat. Amongst them there was a little fish so polite that he even condescended to eat my tail. From this time forth, said his purchaser, horrified, I swear that I will never touch a fish. It would be too dreadful to open a mullet or a fried whiting and to find inside a donkey's tail. I agree with you, said the puppet, laughing. However, I must tell you that when the fish had finished eating the donkey's hide that covered me from head to foot, they naturally reached the bone, or rather the wood, for, as you see, I am made of the hardest wood. But after giving a few bites, they soon discovered that I was not a morsel for their teeth, and, disgusted with such indigestible food, they went off, some in one direction and some in another, without so much as saying thank you to me. And now at the last I have told you how it was that when you pulled up the rope you found a live puppet instead of a dead donkey. I laugh at your story, cried the man in a rage. I know only that I spent $2 to buy you, and I will have my money back. Shall I tell you what I will do? I will take you back to the market, and I will sell you by weight as seasoned wood for lighting fires. Sell me if you like, I am content, said Pinocchio. But as he said it, he made a spring and plunged into the water. Swimming gaily away from the shore, he called to his poor owner, Goodbye, master! If you should be in want of a skin to make a drum, remember me! And he laughed and went on swimming. And after a while, he turned again and shouted louder, Goodbye, master! If you should be in want of a little well-seasoned wood for lighting the fire, remember me! In the twinkling of an eye, He had swum so far off that he was scarcely visible. All that could be seen of him was a little black speck on the surface of the sea, that from time to time lifted its legs out of the water and leaped and capered like a dolphin, enjoying himself. Whilst Pinocchio was swimming, he knew not whither. He saw in the midst of the sea a rock that seemed to be made of white marble, and on the summit there stood a beautiful little goat who bleated lovingly and made signs to him to approach. But the most singular thing was this. The little goat's hair, instead of being white or black, or a mixture of two colors as is usual with other goats, was a blue, and a very vivid blue, greatly resembling the hair of the beautiful child. I leave you to imagine how rapidly poor Pinocchio's heart began to beat. He swam with redoubled strength and energy towards the white rock, and he was already halfway there when he saw rising up out of the water and coming to meet him the horrible head of a sea monster. His wide open cavernous mouth and his 3 rows of enormous teeth would have been terrifying to look at even in a picture. And do you know what this sea monster was? This sea monster was neither more nor less than that gigantic dogfish who has been mentioned many times in this story, and who, for his slaughter and for his insatiable voracity, had been named the Attila of Fish and the Fishermen. Only to think of poor Pinocchio's terror at the sight of this monster. He tried to avoid it, to change his direction. He tried to escape, but that immense, wide-open mouth came towards him with the velocity of an arrow. "Be quick, Pinocchio, for pity's sake!" cried the beautiful little goat, bleating. And Pinocchio swam desperately with his arms, his chest, his legs, and his feet. "Quick, Pinocchio, the monster is close upon you!" And Pinocchio swam quicker than ever and flew on with the rapidity of a ball from a gun. He had nearly reached the rock, and the little goat, leaning over towards the sea, had stretched out her 4 legs to help him out of the water. But it was too late. The monster had overtaken him, and drawing in his breath, he sucked in the poor puppet as he would have sucked a hen's egg, and he swallowed him with such violence and avidity that Pinocchio, in falling into the dogfish's stomach, received such a blow that he remained unconscious for a quarter of an hour afterwards. When he came to himself again after the shock, he could not in the least imagine in what world he was. All around him it was quite dark, and the darkness was so black and so profound that it seemed to him that he had fallen head downwards into an inkstand full of ink. He listened, but he could hear no noise. Only from time to time great gusts of wind blew in his face. At first he could not understand where the wind came from, but at last he discovered that it came out of the monster's lungs. For you must know that the dogfish suffered very much from asthma, and when he breathed, it was exactly as if a north wind was blowing. Pinocchio at first tried to keep up his courage, but when he had one proof after another that he was really shut up in the body of this sea monster, he began to cry and scream and to sob out, "Help! Help! Oh, how unfortunate I am! Will nobody come to save me?" "Who do you think could save you, unhappy wretch?" said a voice in the dark that sounded like a guitar out of tune. "Who is speaking?" asked Pinocchio, frozen with terror. "It is I. I am a poor tunny who was swallowed by the dogfish at the same time that you were. And what fish are you?" "I have nothing in common with fish. I am a puppet." "Then, if you are not a fish, why did you let yourself be swallowed by the monster?" "I didn't let myself be swallowed. It was the monster swallowed me. And now, what are we to do here in the dark?" "Resign ourselves and wait until the dogfish has digested us both." "But I do not want to be digested!" howled Pinocchio, beginning to cry again. "Neither do I. Neither do I want to be digested," added the tunny. "But I am enough of a philosopher to console myself by thinking that when one is born a tunny, it is more dignified to die in the water than in the oil." Tunny, a tuna, especially the bluefin. Tunny. "That is all nonsense!" cried Pinocchio. "It is my opinion," replied the tunny, "and opinions, so say the political tunnies, ought to be respected." "To sum it all up, I want to get away from here. I want to escape." "Escape if you are able." "Is this dogfish who has swallowed us very big?" asked the puppet. "Big? Why, only imagine. His body is 2 miles long without counting his tail." Whilst they were holding this conversation in the dark, Pinocchio thought that he saw a light a long way off. "What is that little light I see in the distance?" he asked. "It is most likely some companion in his misfortune who is waiting like us to be digested." "I will go and find him. Do you not think that it may, by chance, be some old fish who perhaps could show us how to escape?" "I hope it may be so with all of my heart, dear puppet." "Goodbye, tunny." "Goodbye, puppet, and good fortune attend you." "When shall we meet again?" "Who can say? It is better not even to think of it." Chapter 35. A happy surprise for Pinocchio. Pinocchio, having taken leave of his friend the tunny, began to grope his way in the dark through the body of the dogfish, taking a step at a time in the direction of the light that he saw shining dimly at a great distance. The farther he advanced, the brighter became the light, and he walked and walked until at last he reached it. And when he reached it, what did he find? I will give you 1,000 guesses. He found a little table spread out, and on it a lighted candle stuck into a green glass bottle. And seated at the table was a little old man. He was eating some live fish, and they were so very much alive that whilst he was eating them, they sometimes even jumped out of his mouth. At this sight, Pinocchio was filled with such great and unexpected joy that he became almost delirious. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to cry. He wanted to say 1,000 things. And instead, he could only stammer out a few confused and broken words. At last, he succeeded in uttering a cry of joy, and opening his arms, he threw them around the little old man's neck and began to shout, "Oh, my dear Papa, I have found you at last! I will never leave you more! Never more! Never more!" "Then my eyes tell me true?" said the little old man, rubbing his eyes. "Then you are really my dear Pinocchio?" "Yes, yes, I am Pinocchio, really Pinocchio. And you have quite forgiven me, have you not? Oh, my dear Papa, how good you are! And to think that I, on the contrary, oh, but if you only knew what misfortunes have been poured on my head, and all that has befallen me. Only imagine the day that you, poor dear Papa, sold your coat to buy me a spelling book that I might go to school. I escaped to see the puppet show, and the showman wanted to put me on the fire that I might roast his mutton. And he was the same that afterwards gave me 5 gold pieces to take them to you. But I met the fox and the cat, who took me to the inn of the Red Crow Fish, where they ate like wolves. And I led myself in the middle of the night, and I left by myself in the middle of the night, and I encountered assassins who ran after me. And I ran away, and they followed, and I ran, and they always followed me. And I ran until they hung me to a branch of a big oak. And the beautiful child with the blue hair sent a little carriage to fetch me. And the doctors, when they saw me, said immediately, "If he is not dead, it is proof that he is still alive." And then by chance I told a lie, and my nose began to grow until I could no longer get through the door of the room, for which reason I went with the fox and the cat to bury the 4 gold pieces for one I had spent at the inn. And the parrot began to laugh, and instead of 2,000 gold pieces, I found none left. For which reason the judge, when he heard that I had been robbed, had me immediately put in prison to content the robbers. And then, when I was coming away, I saw a beautiful bunch of grapes in a field. And I was caught in a trap, and the peasant, who was quite right, put a dog collar round my neck that I might guard the poultry yard, and acknowledging my innocence, let me go. And the serpent with the smoking tail began to laugh and broke a blood vessel in his chest. And so I returned to the house of the beautiful child, who was dead. And the pigeon, seeing that I was crying, said to me, "I have seen your father, who was building a little boat to go in search of you." And I said to him, "Oh, if I also had wings." And he said to me, "Do you want to go to your father?" And I said, "Without doubt, but who will take me to him?" And he said to me, "I will take you." And I said to him, "How?" And he said to me, "Get on my back." And so we flew all night. And then in the morning all the fishermen who were looking out to sea said to me, "There is a poor man in a boat who is on the point of being drowned." And I recognized you at once, even at that distance, for my heart told me, and I made signs to you to return to land." "I also recognized you," said Geppetto, "and I would willingly have returned to the shore. But what was I to do? The sea was tremendous, and a great wave upset my boat. Then a horrible dogfish, who was near as soon as he saw me in the water, came towards me, and putting out his tongue, took hold of me and swallowed me as if I had been a little apple tart." "And how long have you been shut up here?" asked Pinocchio. "Since that day. It must be nearly 2 years ago. 2 years, my dear Pinocchio, that have seemed like 2 centuries." "And how have you managed to live? And where did you get the candle and the matches to light it? Who gave them to you?" "Stop, and I will tell you everything. You must know then that in the same storm in which my boat was upset, a merchant vessel foundered. The sailors were all saved, but the vessel went to the bottom, and the dogfish, who had that day an excellent appetite, after he had swallowed me, swallowed also the vessel." "How?" "He swallowed it in one mouthful, and the only thing that he spat out was the mainmast, that had stuck between his teeth like a fish bone. Fortunately for me, the vessel was laden with preserved meat in tins, biscuit, bottles of wine, dried raisins, cheese, coffee, sugar, candles, and boxes of wax matches. With this providential supply, I have been able to live for 2 years, but I have arrived at the end of my resources. There is nothing left in the larder, and this candle that you see burning is the last that remains." "And after that?" "After that, dear boy, we shall both remain in the dark." "Then, dear little papa," said Pinocchio, "there is no time to lose. We must think of escaping." "Of escaping? How?" "We must escape through the mouth of the dogfish, throw ourselves into the sea and swim away." "You talk well, but, dear Pinocchio, I don't know how to swim." "What does that matter? I am a good swimmer, and you can get on my shoulders, and I will carry you safely to shore." "All illusions, my boy," replied Geppetto, shaking his head with a melancholy smile. "Do you suppose it possible that a puppet like you, scarcely a yard high, could have the strength to swim with me on his shoulders?" "Try it, and you will see." Without another word, Pinocchio took the candle in his hand, and going in front to light the way, he said to his father, "Follow me, and don't be afraid." And they walked for some time, and traversed the body and the stomach of the dogfish. But when they had arrived at the point where the monster's big throat began, they thought it better to stop, to give a good look around, and to choose the best moment for escaping. Now, I must tell you that the dogfish, being very old and suffering from asthma and palpitation of the heart, was obliged to sleep with his mouth open. Pinocchio, therefore, having approached the entrance to his throat, and looking up, could see beyond the enormous gaping mouth a large piece of starry sky and a beautiful moonlight. "This is the moment to escape," he whispered, turning to his father. The dogfish is sleeping like a dormouse. The sea is calm, and it is as light as day. Follow me, dear papa, and in a short time we shall be in safety. They immediately climbed up the throat of the sea monster, and having reached his immense mouth, they began to walk on tiptoe down his tongue. Before taking the final leap, the puppet said to his father, "Get on my shoulders and put your arms tightly around my neck. I will take care of the rest." As soon as Geppetto was firmly settled on his son's shoulders, Pinocchio, feeling sure of himself, threw himself into the water and began to swim. The sea was as smooth as oil. The moon shone brilliantly, and the dogfish was sleeping so profoundly that even a cannonade would have failed to wake him. The final chapter, chapter 36. Pinocchio at last ceases to be a puppet and becomes a boy. Whilst Pinocchio was swimming quickly towards the shore, he discovered that his father, who was on his shoulders with his legs in the water, was trembling as violently as if the poor man had an attack of ague fever. Was he trembling from cold or from fear? Perhaps a little from both, the one and the other. But Pinocchio, thinking it was from fear, said to comfort him, "Courage, Papa! In a few minutes we shall be safely on the shore." "But where is this blessed shore?" asked the little old man, becoming still more frightened, and screwed up his eyes as tailors do when they wish to thread a needle. "I've been looking in every direction, and I see nothing but the sky and the sea." "But I see the shore well," said the puppet. "You must know that I am like a cat. I see better by night than by day." Poor Pinocchio was making a pretense of being in good spirits, but in reality he was beginning to feel discouraged. His strength was failing. He was gasping and panting for breath. He could do no more, and the shore was still far off. He swam until he had no breath left. Then he turned his head to Geppetto and said in broken words, "Papa, help me! I am dying!" The father and son were on the point of drowning when they heard a voice, like a guitar out of tune, saying, "Who is it that is dying?" "It is I and my poor father." "I know that voice. You are Pinocchio." "Precisely. And you?" "I am the tunny, your prison companion in the body of the dogfish." "And how did you manage to escape?" "I followed your example. You showed me the road, and I escaped after you." "Tunny, you have arrived at the right moment. I implore you to help us, or we are lost." "Willingly and with all my heart. You must, both of you, take hold of my tail and leave it to me to guide you. I will take you on the shore in 4 minutes." Geppetto and Pinocchio, as I need not tell you, accepted the offer at once. But instead of holding on by his tail, they thought it would be more comfortable to get on the tunny's back. Having reached the shore, Pinocchio sprang first on land, that he might help his father to do the same. He then turned to the tunny and said to him in a voice full of emotion, "My friend, you have saved my papa's life. I can find no words with which to thank you properly. Permit me at least to give you a kiss as a sign of my eternal gratitude." The tunny put his head out of the water, and Pinocchio, kneeling on the ground, kissed him tenderly on the mouth. At this spontaneous proof of warm affection, the poor tunny, who was not accustomed to it, felt extremely touched, and, ashamed to let himself be seen crying like a child, he plunged under the water and disappeared. By this time the day had dawned. Pinocchio then, offering his arm to Geppetto, who had scarcely breath to stand, said to him, "Lean on my arm, dear papa, and let us go. We will walk very slowly like the ants, and when we are tired we can rest by the wayside." "And where shall we go?" asked Geppetto. "In search of some house or cottage where they will give us for charity a mouthful of bread and a little straw to serve as a bed." They had not gone 100 yards when they saw by the roadside two villainous-looking individuals begging. They were the cat and the fox, but they were scarcely recognizable. Fancy, the cat had so long feigned blindness that she had become blind in reality, and the fox, old, mangy, and with one side paralyzed, had not even his tail left. That sneaking thief, having fallen into the most squalid misery, one fine day had found himself obliged to sell his beautiful tail to a traveling peddler who bought it to drive away flies. "Oh, Pinocchio!" cried the fox, "give a little in charity to two poor, infirm people." "Infirm people," repeated the cat. "Begone, impostors!" answered the puppet. "You took me in once, but you will never catch me again." "Believe me, Pinocchio, we are now poor and unfortunate indeed." "If you are poor, you deserve it. Recollect the proverb, stolen money never fructifies. Begone, impostors!" And thus saying, Pinocchio and Geppetto went their way in peace. When they had gone another 100 yards, they saw at the end of a path, in the middle of the fields, a nice little straw hut with a roof of tiles and bricks. "That hut must be inhabited by someone," said Pinocchio. "Let us go and knock at the door." They went and knocked. "We are a poor father and son without bread and without a roof," answered the puppet. "Turn the key and the door will open," said the same little voice. Click, click. Pinocchio turned the key and the door opened. They went in and looked here, there, and everywhere, but could see no one. "Oh, where is the master of the house?" said Pinocchio, much surprised. "Here I am, up here." The father and son looked immediately up to the ceiling, and there on a beam they saw the talking cricket. "Oh, my dear little cricket," said Pinocchio, bowing politely to him. "Ha! Now you call me your dear little cricket." But do you remember the time when you threw the handle of a hammer at me to drive me from your house? You are right, Cricket. Drive me away also. Throw the handle of a hammer at me, but have pity on my poor papa. I will have a pity on both father and son, but I wished to remind you of the ill treatment I received from you, to teach you that in this world, when it is possible, we should show courtesy to everybody, if we wish it to be extended to us in our hour of need. You are right, Cricket, you are right, and I will bear in mind the lesson you have given me. But tell me, how you managed to buy this beautiful hat? This hat was given to me yesterday by a goat whose wool was of a beautiful blue color. And where has the goat gone? Asked Pinocchio with lively curiosity. I do not know. And when will it come back? It will never come back. It went away yesterday in great grief and bleating. It seemed to say, "Poor Pinocchio, I shall never see him more, for by this time the dogfish must have devoured him." Did it really say that? Then it was she! It was my dear little fairy! Exclaimed Pinocchio, crying and sobbing. When he had cried for some time, he dried his eyes and prepared a comfortable bed of straw for Geppetto to lie down upon. Then he asked the Cricket, "Tell me, little Cricket, where can I find a tumbler of milk for my poor papa?" 3 fields off from here there lives a gardener called Giangio, who keeps a cows. Go to him, and you will get the milk you are in want of. Pinocchio ran all the way to Giangio's house, and the gardener asked him, "How much milk do you want?" "I want a tumbler full." "A tumbler of milk costs 5 cents. Begin by giving me the 5 cents. "I have not even 1 cent," replied Pinocchio, grieved and mortified. "This is bad, puppet," answered the gardener. "If you have not even 1 cent, I have not even a drop of milk." "I must have patience," said Pinocchio, and he turned to go. "Wait a little," said Giangio. "We can come to an arrangement together. Will you undertake to turn the pumping machine?" "What is the pumping machine?" "It is a wooden pole which serves to draw up the water from the cistern to water the vegetables." "You can try me." "Well then, if you will draw 100 buckets of water, I will give you in compensation a tumbler of milk." "It is a bargain." Giangio then led Pinocchio to the kitchen garden and taught him how to turn the pumping machine. Pinocchio immediately began to work, but before he had drawn up the 100 buckets of water, the perspiration was pouring from his head to his feet. Never before had he undergone such a fatigue. "Up till now," said the gardener, "the labor of turning the pumping machine was performed by my little donkey, but the poor animal is dying." "Will you take me to see him?" said Pinocchio. "Willingly." When Pinocchio went into the stable, he saw a beautiful little donkey stretched on the straw, worn out from hunger and overwork. And after looking at him earnestly, he said to himself, much troubled, "I am sure I know this little donkey. His face is not new to me." And bending over, he asked him in asinine language, "Who are you?" At this question, the little donkey opened his dying eyes and answered in broken words in the same language, "I am Can Del Weak." and having again closed his eyes, he expired. "Oh, poor Candlewick," said the Pinocchio in a low voice, and taking a handful of straw, he dried a tear that was rolling down his face. "Do you grieve for a donkey that cost you nothing?" said the gardener. "What must it be to me, who bought him for ready money?" "I must tell you, he was my friend." "Your friend?" "One of my schoolfellows." "How?" shouted Giangio, laughing loudly. "How? Had you donkeys for schoolfellows? I can imagine what wonderful studies you must have made." The puppet, who felt much mortified at these words, did not answer, but taking his tumbler of milk, still quite warm, he returned to the hut. And from that day, for more than 5 months, he continued to get up at the daybreak every morning to go and turn the pumping machine, to earn the tumbler of milk that was of such benefit to his father in his bad state of health. Nor was he satisfied with this, for during the time that he had over, he learned to make hampers and baskets of rushes. And with the money he obtained by selling them, he was able, with a great economy, to provide for all the daily expenses. Amongst other things, he constructed an elegant little wheelchair, in which he could take his father out on fine days to breathe a mouthful of fresh air. By his industry, ingenuity, and his anxiety to work and to overcome difficulties, he not only succeeded in maintaining his father, who continued infirm in comfort, but he also contrived to put aside $5 to buy himself a new coat. One morning he said to his father, "I am going to the neighboring market to buy myself a jacket, a cap, and a pair of shoes. When I return," he added, laughing, "I shall be so well dressed that you will take me for a fine gentleman." And leaving the house, he began to run merrily and happily along. All at once he heard himself called by a name, and turning around, he saw a big snail crawling out from the hedge. "Do you not know me?" asked the snail. "It seems to me, and yet I am not sure." "Do you not remember the snail who was lady's maid to the fairy with blue hair? Do you not remember the time when I came down the stairs to let you in, and you were caught by your foot, which you had struck through the house door?" "I remember it all!" shouted Pinocchio. "Tell me quickly, my beautiful little snail, where have you left my good fairy? What is she doing? Has she forgiven me? Does she still remember me? Does she still wish me well? Is she far from here? Can I go and see her?" To all these rapid, breathless questions, the snail replied in her usual phlegmatic manner. "My dear Pinocchio, the poor fairy is lying in bed at the hospital." "At the hospital?" "It is only too true. Overtaken by 1,000 misfortunes, she has fallen seriously ill, and she has not even enough to buy herself a mouthful of bread." "Is it really so? Oh, what sorrow you have given me! Oh, poor fairy, poor fairy, poor fairy! If I had 1,000,000, I But I have only $5. Here they are. I was going to buy a new coat. Take them, snail, and carry them at once to my good fairy. And your new coat? What matters my new coat? I would sell even these rags that I have on to be able to help her. Go, snail, and be quick, and in 2 days return to this place, for I hope I shall then be able to give you some more money. Up to this time, I have worked to maintain my papa. From today, I will work 5 hours more, that I may also maintain my good mama. Goodbye, snail. I shall expect you in 2 days. The snail, contrary to her usual habit, began to run like a lizard in a hot August sun. That evening, Pinocchio, instead of going to bed at 10 o'clock, sat up till midnight had struck, and instead of making 8 baskets of rushes, he made 16. Then he went to bed and fell asleep. And whilst he slept, he thought that he saw the fairy, smiling and beautiful, who, after having kissed him, said to him, "Mwah. Well done, Pinocchio. To reward you for your good heart, I will forgive you for all that is past. Boys who minister tenderly to their parents and assist them in their misery and infirmities are deserving of great praise and affection, even if they cannot be cited as examples of obedience and good behavior. Try and do better in the future, and you will be happy." At this moment, his dream ended, and Pinocchio opened his eyes and awoke. But imagine his astonishment when, upon awakening, he discovered that he was no longer a wooden puppet, but that he had become instead a boy. Like all other boys, he gave a glance round and saw that the straw walls of the hut had disappeared, and that he was in a pretty little room, furnished and arranged with a simplicity that was almost elegance. Jumping out of bed, he found a new suit of clothes ready for him, a new cap, and a pair of new boots that fitted him beautifully. He was hardly dressed when he naturally put his hands in his pockets and pulled out a little ivory purse on which these words were written: "The fairy with blue hair returns the $5 to her dear Pinocchio and thanks him for his good heart." He opened the purse, and instead of $5, he saw 50 shining gold pieces fresh from the mint. He then went and looked at himself in the glass, and he thought he was someone else. For he no longer saw the usual reflection of a wooden puppet. He was greeted instead by the image of a bright, intelligent boy with a chestnut hair, blue eyes, and looking as happy and joyful as if it were the Easter holidays. In the midst of all these wonders succeeding each other, Pinocchio felt quite bewildered, and he could not tell if he was really awake or if he was dreaming with his eyes open. "Where can my papa be?" he exclaimed suddenly, and going into the next room, he found old Geppetto quite well, lively, and in good humor, just as he had been formerly. He had already resumed his trade of wood carving, and he was designing a rich and beautiful frame of leaves, flowers, and the heads of animals. Satisfy my curiosity, dear papa, said Pinocchio, throwing his arms around his neck and covering him with kisses. How can this sudden change be accounted for? This sudden change in our home is all your doing, answered Geppetto. How am I doing? Because when the boys who have behaved badly turn over a new leaf and become good, they have the power of bringing contentment and happiness to their families. And where has the old wooden Pinocchio hidden himself? There he is, answered Geppetto, and he pointed to a big puppet leaning against the chair with his head on one side, its arms dangling, and its legs so crossed and bent that it was really a miracle that it remained standing. Pinocchio turned and looked at it, and after he had looked at it for a short time, he said to himself with great complacency, How ridiculous I was when I was a puppet, and how glad I am that I have become a well-behaved little boy. The end. Good night, baby Elias. Ciao.